So today's video is going to be just basic decal application. Most of my stuff is how to do the base. I wanted to show you the importance of doing a really smooth base. Just for giggles, I actually have one that had a really rough epoxy layer because this is so chunky and it just didn't lay down properly. This is exaggerated, but this is why you want to make sure and have your base smooth, because nobody wants to get a cup and see dimples in there. Different if you're doing like a braille cup or something, which I know people do, but that's not the typical desired effect. So I'm gonna take that off since that is actually permanent epoxy, permanent vinyl, and I don't want to fight it later. But you can kind of see the texture that it leaves behind. So I've sanded and sanded and sanded, and just for giggles, I left one really rough patch here. If for some reason you sand it and you use the wrong grit or something and it ends up just, my thing is wobbling and I'm not sure why, so I'm trying to level it. If you sand it with the wrong grit and you're just not sure if it's gonna hide or not, one trick you can do is just to use a little good grief, I need a bloopers reel. That one just cut right in half. I tore it right in half on accident. One way you can tell if that's going to disappear under your epoxy is just alcohol it. See if it vanishes. If you still have any lines of any sort in there, it's not going to hide. But if it is completely gone, you can't see it while it's wet, then you're in good shape. So I have my decals cut and ready. Ta-da! I went ahead and put electrical tape at the top because I wanted to use that as a guideline for my placement, because I do not want everything to end up too high or too low. So I have this basically just Danish flag. I need to go a little above where that tape is. Actually, I skipped a step. So I have marked, you can kind of see the score marks right there. The one closest to the tape is what I'm going to use. I've marked it on both sides. That one right there. Because we are going to use that as our middle guideline. So the center of my decal is 3.5 squares over. So 1, 2, 3, right in there is about where I want to line that up. And I actually don't want this too low. So I'm going to end up lifting this up to get it out of my way. But it still gets me good alignment. So we have something that we can rub. You can use a popsicle stick or whatever. I like this little tool. It came with my Cricut mat. I've actually melted it a little bit trying to use my heat gun on it. So if you're doing a big label, you typically want to start in the middle and work your way out, but I kind of laid this bad boy right down without really planning that out. So you just want to gently lay it down. You can do long, slow strokes like that, but I want to work out any air bubbles. I know my hand is in the way on that, but I can get the gist right there. So just like that. And we are going to gently lift this transfer tape up. Voila. And now we want to check it for air bubbles. I'm going to put this back on the backing real quick. We want to check for air bubbles right now. That way we can smooth them out if needed. Nice and smooth results there. Because I sanded the heck out of this thing. No way that was going to have a roughness at that point. So I don't want to push that down real hard because I don't want to lift up my decal whenever I'm taking the tape off. So now I'm going to transfer this onto my transfer tape. And I'll actually show you how to do that really quickly. See how clean that is? I just cleaned it off with alcohol. It was getting pretty gnarly. So I'm going to use a center line here and just kind of eyeball it. But I do want to try and line up the bottom with the grid lines there, so that it makes it easier to place here. I did not do the conical warp adjustment on this, since it's just a couple letters and just a small kind of line on that other one. I didn't even worry about it. So now we're going to gently, possibly not successfully, remove that from the backing. One of my least favorite parts of doing these tumblers is the vinyl. Ugh. Okay, success. So we've got that. I'm going to put it on here just for a minute. This is the backing of the transfer tape. You can use transfer tape over and over, pretty much till it loses its stickiness. You can use it. So I didn't really measure this properly. I know you can't really see these letters very well, but this is about at an 8, so I'm going to use a 4. So pretty much where I put that line is almost perfectly on center. I didn't really anticipate that being that successful. So I'm going to take this off now, nice and gently. Here's my line again. I'm going to line it up with that. So we're going to, it's called burnishing. It has a name. Oh, good grief, you can't even see what I'm doing. Okay, sorry about that. So it's called burnishing. Just a fancy word for rubbing. And once again, my thing is rocking. I gotta figure out what's going on with it. Yeah, so, whoa, crap. Get back on there. Clearly I didn't push that part hard enough. There we go. Okay, so just, that's why you do it gently. You don't rip it off like you're waxing your legs, because that would have been a pretty gnarly result and would have messed up my decal. I would have had to redo it. So I'm going to put that back on my backing, toss that aside, and I'm just going to check for air bubbles. I have one tiny, tiny little air bubble right there. Just going to gently work it out. If you push really hard, it will scratch up your vinyl. If you're doing a metallic vinyl, you have to be super careful. You want something on top of it before you're rubbing along, because it will mess up. So that turned out pretty good. I have one tiny, tiny little spot, which could be a piece of glitter underneath that, or let's see if I can get, there we go. That's pretty good. I'm not super, super concerned. That's so minimal that it's not really that noticeable in the grand scheme of things. So anyways, so that's that. I like to kind of get an idea if it's anywhere remotely close to centered. That's pretty close. It may not be perfect, but that's okay. So now I'll take this jaw off gently. I like to let my vinyl sit. Some people call it resting. Some people just call it leaving it. Everyone's different on their terminology for that part. But I like to let it sit overnight. I feel like almost every time I've ever done epoxy immediately after vinyl, I've regretted it. So yeah, that's how you do that. And that's the importance of doing that on a smooth surface, because even though I sanded the bejesus out of it, I did still end up with that tiny little spot right there. But again, that could be a piece of glitter that kind of floated its way on there. So what I like to do after this has rested overnight, I'll clear coat this just with a Krylon clear coat, let that dry, and then I'll epoxy over it. So if you have any questions, please give me a shout, just leave a comment, and I will do my best to answer everything. So that's it. Just real basic. Easy peasy.